Welcome, Sens Talk. All right, welcome to Sens Talk. I'm your host, Brandon Plant, and I'm joined here with friend of the show and voice of the Ottawa Senators, Dean Brown. Dean, it is always a pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Summertime, so it's a little bit slower than normal, but yeah, I'm all good. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, anytime. Any big plans for the summer before we get into some Sens Talk?
No, not really. Just the normal kind of stuff. Nothing major planned. Yeah, just kind of banging through it, and some little things to do. But other than that, nothing major.
How are the dogs, by the way?
Dogs are fantastic. The dogs are fantastic. We have two Newfs, so they're big, and they're not really super big on the summer. They're more winter dogs. They like it when it's
The
the
snow.
colder the better. When it gets really hot, they're not big on that, but they're fine for now.
Dude, how long are they out there when there's a snowstorm? I'm sure they love to roll around the snow. My dog loves it.
Yeah. Oh well. When it's a snowstorm, they just like winter. We've had people say to us, well, there'll be pictures of them, and we say, well, he's been out there for 3.5 hours. They go, well, you should bring him in. It's -30. The hard part is getting them to come in. Like they love -30. So yeah, when it's cold, they're outside for hours, just sleeping outside. They like being outside because the cold, like I said, the colder the better.
Gotta love dogs. There's literally nothing like them. They are so much fun in so many different ways. So glad to hear that. Now let's get into some Sens talk. I
Yep.
want to ask you right off the bat, just overall, before we get into some specific things, thoughts on the season and the playoffs overall. Was it a success? Just your thoughts overall on the year for the Ottawa Senators.
You know what? Brandon, can't see how even the most, distant or unobservant or even angry fan would see this as anything but a success. I realize it's just a step, but I think the team took a massive step this year. It's like bullfighting, all the things you have to do to prepare to be a bullfighter, all those steps are important, but there's no bigger step than getting in the ring. That's the biggest step. And then other steps come after that. And that's what this was. This team advanced and got themselves in a position where they could be in the playoffs. And there's still obviously more steps to come, but this was a massive step forward for the team. So I think it's great for the fans. It's great for the team. Very optimistic. And I think that one of the things that the playoff series against the Leafs showed people is how close this team may well be to being a really, really good team. Because you look at Toronto playing Florida right now, you can see Toronto now is a really good team, and Ottawa could have very easily beaten them in the first round. You look at that string of three overtime games, like they Ottawa could have very easily won that series. So, I think people are starting to see that this team has the chance to be not just a good team, but could turn into a really, really good team.
Absolutely. And I think the performances we saw from some of the core guys, like Kachuk, I mean, 7 points, 4 goals, absurd. Tim Stützle led the team in faceoffs, which he noted in his postseason or post, overall season availability. I know how postseason sounds for some people.
Yep.
How his faceoff situation isn't the greatest, but I had to point that out for the playoffs. He had the highest percentage, so there's something of positive there. So the key guys performed. But kind of on the note of the postseason, everyone's here to listen to you, not me. I already gave my thoughts before. So on that note, I'll kind of talk about it after as well. But on the note of the playoffs, what were the biggest things that we learned and probably also the Ottawa Senators learned in the playoffs? Because like you said, they're right there, but there was a couple of mistakes that ultimately cost them.
Sure. I think that's one of the things. I think one of the things that they learned as a team is that in the playoffs, a couple of little mistakes can cost you a game, cost you a series, and those are painful but valuable lessons to learn that, the margins between victory and defeat in the playoffs are, just far different than they are in the regular season. And the things that can cause you to lose a game sometimes at the moment don't seem that monstrous, but they can be very, very big. So I think that's one of the things that they learned. I think for me anyway, looking at the playoffs, I think one of the big steps that Ottawa took was that I was actually surprised that they were so good at it was after the first game, The first game in the series, I think there was lots of first playoff game jitters because the majority of the team had never been in a playoff game before. So I think that was understandable. And I know some people said, well, the first 5 minutes, 5, 10 minutes. Yeah, but there's big chunks of that game where, the lights were brighter and the stage was bigger for those guys than ever before. What surprised me was after that, how quickly they were able to get back to their game. The very next game, they were playing the way they had played to get themselves in the playoffs. So, you hear coaches often say, the sooner we can get to our game, the better off we'll be, or the sooner we can get back to our game, the better off we'll be. And I was surprised with, a big lack of playoff experience on that team. I was surprised how they were able to get back to their game in the very next game and sustain that. For the rest of the series, they played their game. And like I said, the difference between Ottawa and Toronto was very, very marginal. In the overtime games, it's a goal. One shot is the difference between the two teams.
Absolutely, absolutely. And kudos to Toronto, by the way. I mean, their series is still going on with Florida, but that is a team that, I mean, just like Ottawa, has matured. Now, obviously, they've had a lot more time to mature and a lot more practice to get to that point. But like you said, that quick turnaround by Ottawa was so impressive, and I think kudos has to go to that coaching staff, obviously to the guys in the locker room as well. Obviously, they're the ones playing, but the coaching staff all year. That was the biggest takeaway for me and the Ottawa Senators this year is the maturity from this group. And you saw it after game one, like you said, just in the discipline. The lack of discipline in game one was the story. Oh, that's the story. And game two, it was a little iffy, but much better than game one. Game six, unfortunately, they scored on the lone power play, but they only had one penalty taken in game six, an elimination game. So, again, like you said, for a team with literally a handful of guys with playoff experience, that was very impressive. And that is the biggest reason, in my opinion, Sens fans should have optimism. Guys like Kachuk and Stutzla, already unbelievable players, even have more to give. You got guys like Jake Sanderson on the back end. You got Clevin emerging. You got Linus Ullmark. There's so much to be positive about. But as I mentioned in my last video, and I'm sure you would agree with this, it all starts from the top. You will never have success if you don't have strong leadership throughout the organization. You got Ann Lauer, who's putting the resources in throughout. You got Steos. You got, of course, Travis Green. So, again, maturity, in my opinion, is the name of the game, if you want to call it, for the Ottawa Senators this year. Because, again, it was so impressive to see how, like you said, they bounced back after, frankly, an embarrassing opening loss. And kind of on that note, by the way, and you were in the building all year, obviously, you're covering the games, calling the games. But the crowds leading up to the playoffs, but especially in the playoffs, the buzz in the city. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that? Because the players, they said themselves, and you saw it, they fed off that because that crowd, and I think all Sens fans watching this would agree, in the playoffs, is one of the best barns in the league, for sure.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. There's no question about that. The thing that I found interesting about that is that, you know, having not made the playoffs in 7 years, and so you're into your eighth year now, and for a lot of younger fans, they were not around during the times when this barn was loud all the time because the team made the playoffs all the time and it was exciting, and they're going to the final in '07, and so they were around. They might have been living for it, but they weren't fans yet. They were too young, and so I found it interesting that for them, all they knew was the stories about what this building was like in the playoffs, not what it actually was like. And for the people who were there, they remember those stories, but the longer you don't go through it, the longer it kind of gets muted, and you just remember, yeah, yeah, it was kind of wild. Yeah, yeah, it was really good. But it kind of gets muted over time. And I think the people who had been there before when this team was in the playoffs and knew what that building would be like, I think it reignited them where they were, yeah, 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 we're living this. Yes, okay. And the people who had heard the stories, they're now living the story and they're going, this is what I heard about. This is the stuff that I heard about. So I think there was like two parts of the fan base that were experiencing the same thing, but kind of in different ways because of where they were when this was a semi-normal thing in Ottawa. The team just always made the playoffs and the building was always bonkers. So it was really, I loved seeing it, and I loved hearing it. And I think it reminded a lot of people, both in the city and outside of the city, how good a playoff city this is, and how energized and alive that building is during the playoffs. And the other thing is, what a good job they do in the building. Because of the age of the building, because of the technology that they have to deal with, and they've tried to make upgrades, but age is age. You can't get around it. And I think I really am impressed with, and I really have, a lot of accolades to throw around, um, to Emily Knight and her crew. They do all the in-rink entertainment, all the video boards and stuff, And I don't know if you noticed, but they had this company come in and they installed all these little mini lights all around the building. So they had lights in the stands that they could control. And just the show that they put on, in addition to the hockey show, was absolutely fantastic with what there's so many more buildings now that are just
Yeah,
eons ahead technologically, just
it's been
eons ahead technologically. And Ottawa's new building will be as well. But right now, with what they have to deal with, I thought that part of the organization did a fantastic job too.
could not agree more. Again, just from a fan perspective, the game experience certainly got better. That was something that was lacking in the last few years of the Melnick era because, again, there just wasn't, in my opinion, anyways, from what we saw as fans, enough being put into the fan experience. You see it with the bell and the little things like that, all the giveaways, they're trying to enhance that game day experience. And again, that shows a healthy organization when they're giving back to the fans and trying to create incentive again instead of kind of taking the fan base for granted. And I think a lot of the fan base has whether they say it or not, I think we've all kind of recognized that. And again, like I said, it all starts from the top. So could not agree with you more. And I think, like you said, older building for sure, but they're doing pretty good with what they got. That's for sure. Back to on the ice, though, just in terms of, and you can talk about the season and the playoffs. You can have some fun with this, whatever you want.
Yep.
Who
Yep.
was the most surprising player this season and playoff, and the most disappointing in the season and playoff?
Um, who was the most surprising? Who was the most surprising? You know what? I think probably for me, the most surprising was Matt and Palo. Just because surprise for me anyway is usually related to expectation. So you have an expectation, Tim Stützle is the most skilled player on the team. So was I surprised that he had a really strong season? No, he's the most skilled.
Yeah.
We all know what kind of a guy Brady Tkachuk is and what kind of a player. So him having a season like that, was I surprised? No, that's Brady. It's high level. But for Nicholas Matt, I have to be honest with you, I didn't really know much about him. I was kind of surprised that a guy that age took that long to get to the NHL. So you're always wondering, like, this guy's probably just going to be a career minor leaguer. And he ended up being a guy, and there's some of them who are like this. When you talk to hockey people, like people that really know, not guys like me, but like managers, coaches, scouts, stuff like that. There are some players that are actually better in the NHL than they are in the AHL. And apparently a lot of it has to do with, sometimes in the AHL, the play can be kind of scattered and random. And when the NHL, by and large, is more structured. And some guys actually, their brains work better that way. And they end up being better players in the NHL than they were in the AHL. And I think he's probably one of those. I thought that he became a very good player. And I was surprised, when he was asked to play for his country in the Four Nations, and surprised how good a player he was in the Four Nations for a young player with no experience, and especially
Yeah.
not at that elite level.
Yeah.
So I think for surprises, positive surprises, I think for me, Matt and Palo would be the biggest surprise because I had zero expectations. I thought that, and maybe there's a guy that they'll call up when they have an injury and he'll play 4 or 5 games and go back down. That was just,
Yeah.
since I hadn't seen him before. So he would probably be my biggest surprise. My biggest disappointment is kind of, and I'm saying this right off the bat, it's probably unfair because the sample size is too small. Um, but I think for me, probably Zetterland. I was expecting, after that trade was made, I was expecting more. And I think what I should have expected was a young guy who's been in one system on a team that's not very good, coming to a team that's a playoff team, and he's got to fit in.
Yeah.
He's got to learn a new system. He's got to get settled. He's got to, but and I think it was the same. I think it was the same with the coaching and management staff as well, not knowing exactly what he was, because it isn't very normal during the playoffs where a player will go back and forth between being your starting right winger on your fourth line
Yeah.
to being your starting left winger on your first line, and then back again.
No
In a lot of ways, that if there's no injury that causes it, but in a lot of times that tells you that they're struggling to figure out what they think he can be, what they think he is right now, what he can be, what he will be. And so, like I said, I think probably labeling him my biggest disappointment would be a tad unfair, but I don't know exactly what I expected, but every time I'm seeing him in San Jose, I thought he was an impressive young player, and I just didn't see as much of that here as I thought I would. But I think a lot of that may have to do with just being settled in and being a part of the group and knowing guys and knowing the system and understanding what Travis Green is asking of them. So again, it might be unfair, but probably that was the one where I don't know what I was expecting, but I was expecting more, you know?
I think that's fair. Again, like he got great looks every game, but all that matters is scoring, and he didn't
Yeah.
score until like the last few games. So completely fair. And I think the analysis on the coaching staff not knowing what to do with him also contributed to the struggles as well. But I will say, from New Jersey to San Jose, in the first 20 or so games in San Jose, he struggled too. So, he's got that experience now with the new system. He's got a whole summer now. We know he's a tank. They say he's built like a cigarette machine, right? So he's a big boy. You got Kachuk there. Tim Stützle threw the most hits, in the playoffs on the Ottawa Senators. So you got three heavy hitters there potentially on line one. Potentially, we'll see what happens
Yeah.
next year. So I'm optimistic still, and I think you are too, because again, you see the skill there, you see that speed. He's still young. He did well in San Jose, but again, totally understand why, and I don't get it. It didn't stick for whatever reason, and you just got to hope that that experience and that time with the players, and another summer can just kind of help him reset and kind of allow him to get into things normally like he normally would instead of mid-year going from completely different scenarios from San Jose to Ottawa, two different cities in many, many different ways. It's very understanding to see that, but also again, when you're training for a guy that you think could be in the top six, you definitely do want a bit more. What I would say is my most surprising player. I would probably say Tyler Clevin, purely because in preseason and training camp, I thought he would make the team, but only because of necessity. I didn't think he had a good preseason or training camp. I expected more, and he was I don't know, he just wasn't physical. He just wasn't really there. But as the season came on, so did Tyler Clevin, right? And my goodness, by the time the playoffs rolled around, he looked like a seasoned 20-year grizzled veteran. So that was my biggest surprise. I was so excited to see that. My biggest disappointment will be purely in the playoffs, because Batherson in the regular season had career numbers. He had a fantastic year, and that playoffs that he had should not erase that at all. And anyone that says, we'll talk about this later, about Batherson potentially being traded, I'm not for that at all. That's a guy that is a valuable piece, a core piece, and I wouldn't even consider it to be honest with you. But in the playoffs, the defensive side of his game was lacking. I think Cousins as well would say that. There's a couple of costly errors that need to be cleaned up. But hey, that, like what you said, is what the young team has to go through to get to that next step. So I think he'll be fine. But if I had to pick somebody, probably him, because otherwise, overall, the roster, pretty impressive. I can't complain. Everyone really contributed, even if it wasn't consistently through the year. Now, kind of shifting over back to off the ice with management, coaching, and whatnot. What are your thoughts on just overall? Because you're in the CTC much more often than me. You're talking to the guys and whatnot. What are your thoughts on Anlauer, Steos, Green, just everyone there in the management and coaching staff shifting the culture in the organization and whatnot?
I think number one, I think first, I think when you start with ownership, when you start with Michael Landauer, I think fans want to know, they want to know a bunch of things and they want to feel comfortable with those thoughts. But I think number one, they want to feel like and know that the owner cares and Michael and Lucy care. And like I don't think fans feel comfortable. Like in some other cities, they never see the owner, they never hear from the owner. The owner is just a guy, and and in some of those places, that's fine. That's what they become used to. Here, there's always been a greater, and I think part of it is our market size, but there's always been a greater level of connectivity that's either wanted or needed. And when it's not there, you can feel it and sense it. And so I think number one, how visibly, like easy to understand and easy to clearly see and hear how committed that Michael and Lucy, his wife, are, is number one. That makes people feel at ease immediately. And then when you see how connected they are, then you start to ask yourself about, you know, connected is great, but what about commitment? Well, then you see him, spending millions of dollars on a building that he's going to eventually leave. And as we talked about with the fan experience stuff, the money they've spent, he's spending money. Like they spent $1 million before the season started last year, changing the medical room and the workout room just to create an environment for the players to be able to focus on things and do the work properly. And you got to spend $1 million. Okay, spend $1 million. So I think fans feel good when they see that commitment to it. Some people I think don't like the fact when they see Michael during games sitting with the general manager, sitting with Steos, sitting with Steve, and sitting with Dave Poulin and the guys up in the hockey operations box for games. And other fans like it that he's that into the game. That's where he wants to be. He's not in a corporate box having cocktails and stuff. So I think you're going to get two sides of that coin. But what it does do when you see him up there is because there's always a camera on that box, you see his true, natural, organic emotions to things that happen in the game. And I personally think that people like that because you can't fake that. You know what I mean? Like you've seen
Raw and
those.
natural. We saw it in the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. And so that kind of connects back to that whole idea that fans want to know that the owner cares.
Yes.
Well, you see some of that candid video of him, up in the box. You watch that for 5 minutes and he's connected. There's nothing phony about that. And then just the fact that, how much Michael and his partners, how much money they have. And I don't mean to, have those garish conversations about wealth, but you don't worry that something is not possible because it costs too much. Like he just sold his company and he's going to run the new company that he's selling it to, but he just sold his company for $2.2 billion and he just put that in his pocket. So
Not a bad day.
you know what I mean? And like he's got partners who have as much or more money than him. So when they start talking about the new building, for example, when Eugene was in negotiations to build the new building, as soon as negotiations start, people were talking about, well, where's he going to get the money to do it?
Yeah.
Well, no one is having those conversations about Michael because they know that when it's time to build that building, he's got the money. He and his partners have the money. Getting that money is not going to be, that's not an issue. That's not even a talking point. That's not well, how will he, that's not even a thing. And all those things create this environment where you go, he's the guy that's got this. He's got control of this. And then after that, the natural progression is you start looking at the hockey decisions that he has made as the owner. And he's put the ball in the hands of Steve Staios.
Steady,
And I did not, what's
steady,
that?
steady Steve Stamkos.
Steady Steve. There you go. Yeah. Steve is, I did not really know Steve before he took this job, and I've gotten to know Steve. And Steve is very methodical. He's very focused. He's a 24/7 guy. He is locked on it 24/7. And, to a certain extent, all of them are. But like Steve is a locked in guy, and he has an idea about what he wants and thinks the culture should be to create a winning culture. And he's not going to scrimp on that. And and you can agree or disagree whether some of the things that he's done internally about creating that environment are good to do, bad to do, over the top, under the, like, well, you can always debate those things, but the bottom line is he wants to create a culture because culture creates everything else after that. He's not, the cart has never been before the horse with him. And you just look at results. He's taken a team that couldn't make the playoffs to a team that is in the playoffs. And he picks a coach that, did not have the same pedigree as some of the other coaches that were available in the marketplace. But he said after looking at what was out there, this is the guy that he thinks was right for his team. Well, pretty hard to argue that after you look at just 1 year. But if you look at the first year results, I put Travis Green. I'm one of the guys who votes for the Jack Adams Trophy as Coach of the Year. So in our ballots, there's 3 spots. You pick 3 spots, and the things are chosen by points. So a coach, he gets 3 points for every time he's chosen by one of the broadcasters as the first pick. The second pick gets 2, third pick gets 1. So you could theoretically win Coach of the Year and not have any first place ballots. Now it never happens, but you could. So for me, my ballot, like I don't mind telling people, my number one was Carberry in Washington, where he, to me, took a team that nobody thought would even make the playoffs. Never mind, play the kind of season that they had. My second pick went to the coach in Winnipeg, And my third pick was Travis Green. And I know people would say, well, it's just homerism. It's just, he's picking the coach that he sees every day. It's just homerism. And I say, well, I don't think so. I don't see myself as a homer in that way. Um, and I don't think so because for me, for that third selection, I was looking at Monty, I was looking at Travis Green, and I was looking at Martin St. Louis, who
All fair
made
options.
the top three. And the reason that I picked Travis Green was that every general manager in the NHL, when they're talking about the current coach they have, the team they have, or the coach they're looking for and the kind of coach they want to get, they have to be able to defend.
Hmm.
Defend, defend, defend. You can't win the cup in this league without being able to defend. Everybody knows that. So being able, teaching and maintaining a level of the ability to defend in this league is the number one thing that every team is looking for from their team and from their coach. And so I look at this and I say to myself, I'm trying to find another coach who has taken a team that was tied for last year, tied for dead last in the NHL in team save percentage, not goalie save percentage, not positional, team save percentage, tied with Philadelphia for last. And on this team, from Christmas on, never left the top 10 and were as high as fifth best in the league at one point just a couple of weeks before the end of the regular season. Then they gave up some goals in some big games and the number went up. But they finished the season eighth. So my point was, you show me another coach in this league this year that has taken their team from last in the league to top 10. Your top 10 is your elite. In this league, basically your top 10 is your elite, your middle 10 teams, those are your good teams. Your bottom 10, 12 teams, those are the teams that are searching to become one of the top groups. So if you go into the top 10, you're considered one of the elite defensive teams in this league. So my point was, I'm looking at all the coaches in the year in the league, and for my third place ballot, I can't find another coach who's taken his team from last to elite in one season. So my third place ballot went to Travis Green. And I don't care that people might call me a homer for doing that because I think the reasoning is legitimate. And surprisingly, I've talked to a couple of other broadcasters around the league who also, like me, vote. And I was surprised that several others did as well. Several others picked Travis Green as well. So that kind of makes you feel like you're not the only one who sees that part of it. But so you go through all those stages, and that all to get back to your original point, Brandon, that all cascades down from ownership. That all cascades down, and that's why when you said it's got to start from the top, you're right. It has to start from the top. There's no other way for it to occur.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing for me is in those on Saturday or last Saturday, I should say, the end of season availabilities with Stutzla and Cousins and whatnot. Every single one of the players, literally every single one, and you were there, I'm sure, so you heard it too,
Mhm.
praised without even being asked Travis Green. They all praised him. And what that is showing to me is the biggest criticism with DJ Smith wasn't the fact that the players did not like him. No, they liked him too much. It turned into more of a the culture just wasn't there to have accountability. I think that's what a lot of people would say. Travis Green can have that type of energy like DJ Smith, who I have a lot of respect for, and it sucks it didn't work out here. But he has that relationship with the players, but the defensive structure and the accountability he's installed into this team, again, back to the main point from even before, the maturity and whatnot, it shows. So I think we got the best of both worlds. We got a coach that this young team, and you know how it is with younger players. It's not like the old days, right? You need a more of a player coach. So you have that aspect while still bringing in the biggest issue that we had going into the, last year anyways, the defensive side of things. Now, obviously, on the offensive side of things, we took a bit of a hit because of our defensive structure. I think that'll even out next year now that they know how to play defensively. The offense will come. But again, I could not agree with you more. Steos, and you made the point about with Steos that some people may not agree or disagree or whatever with everything he does. But with a leader, you need one at the top that is just ready to do what they think is best. You can't have somebody that's, not able to make a decision, right? You need somebody that is confident in what they're doing, and in the direction of the franchise. And that's what Steos is. That's what Andlauer is. That's what Green is. So at all key positions in the management structure, if you want to call it that, you have guys that, all hold the belief of accountability, but more so, they all hold the belief that this team can get better and better. And I think again, it's great to see how this team in a grand swoop, if you want to call it, has shifted completely. And it's funny, last year we are talking all about the offense Now we're talking all about the defense. Now next year, hopefully it just evens out, right? Hopefully that's what happens. And kind of just talking about the locker room, by the way, you've been in that locker room. Gord Wilson has been there a lot as well. So I'm sure you guys have had a lot of conversation with the players. So kind of talk to us a bit about that locker room. Honestly, I don't think I've seen a tighter group here in Ottawa since that run to the conference finals. I'll be honest with you. This group seems very, very tight and like a brotherhood, to be honest.
Yeah, you know what? That '07 group was pretty tight, but I think I may have told you this before, Brandon, and nothing has changed. In my, what is it, 33, 34 years of doing this, I'm 90 from 92 on. This is the tightest group that's ever been here.
Wow.
I can tell you that. This absolutely is the tightest group. They do so many things together. They do enjoy each other's time together. It is normal. It is the norm that on every team you're going to have, a group that gets along, but you're always going to have like splinter groups, little pods of these guys have dinner together all the time. These guys all, um, and and that's normal. But with this group, I've never been around a team where they're not told to, there's no requirement to do it, but they all go and do things together because they like each other's company. They genuinely do. And I've never seen here a group tighter than this group is, which to me is amazing since because it isn't a new thing. This has been like this for a while. And it's amazing to me because, in any league that's a cap league like this one, but in this league, because it's a cap league, that every roster, whether you win the Stanley Cup or finish dead last, every roster in this league changes by about 20% every year. That's just the reality of a cap league. And so this roster has changed in some way every year. Yet the environment and the culture in that room and the way they accept and embrace new players into that culture is quite an amazing thing. And that also starts at the top. That starts with Brady Tkachuk, and that starts with the leadership group of the team and how they bring people in and how they make them feel. And it does amaze me how you have new players coming in who say after not a long period of time, after a month, they go, I've never played on a team as tight as this.
Zetterlund
And
and
they're not
Cousins both
saying,
said that.
who said that?
Zetterlund and Cousins both said that
Yeah,
exact.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And because it is something you see right away. Like you talk to guys when they first get here and they say, like 15 minutes after the trade was made, I got a text and a phone call and I spoke to the general manager and the coach. And Jordan Silmser, the team services guy, was on the phone to talk to me about the trade. And when I hung up the phone from him, I looked at my phone and I have 12 texts from players. You know what I mean? Like, and there's lots of stories about, guys landing and Brady and Shabbat and Bathurst, and they're at the airport to greet the guy. There's no requirement to do that, but that's what they do, and that comes down from Brady and the management and the leadership group because that's the kind of people they are. With Brady, there's a direct line. There's a direct line between if you ever spend time with his dad, and I've been fortunate enough to spend a little bit of time over the years with Keith. Big Walt is he is fantastic. The stories are fantastic. I'll tell you what, if you spend, I don't care who you are, you can be the biggest curmudgeon in the world. You spend 10 minutes with Big Walt, it's going to be the best 10 minutes of your day because he's just a great guy. Anyway, but once you know a bit about him and you know a bit about Matthew and you know more about Brady because you know him. You know how Brady became Brady when you talk to Big Walt and who taught him how to be a good teammate, who taught him about what leadership really is and how important the little details are. Not the great big magnanimous things, but the little things like being the captain. The first text from a player he should see, the new guy, is a text from you. It should be from you. And it is every time, so, you know, Brady has learned, to become who he is as a player and as a teammate and as a leader and as a captain directly from his father. Who knows? His father was a great player and a great leader, and all those things have been passed down. And that's a part of who Brady is. So again, Brady doesn't have to work at it. Brady doesn't have to think about, what should I do? It's automatic for him because that's the way he is. It's the way he's wired. And those are the things that contribute to what we're talking about the culture in the room. The culture in the room has to be formed and given direction. But then you trust that the people you've chosen to execute the culture, your leadership group and your captain, that they're the kind of people who can do that. And this group, that leadership group and Brady, it is, and it does. That is the internal culture of this team.
And internal, culture should be the name of the day, I guess, because the Ottawa Senators, and I'm not going to name names. I've heard from people throughout the organization in previous years that it was just very toxic. I don't think that's surprising to many of you watching this, and of course to you, Dean. What I will say is, and I said this in my last video, the Ottawa Senators have a healthy atmosphere. It's not toxic, it's healthy. You see it in the locker room, as you just mentioned, but just everywhere, communications, medical, just management, everything. It's healthy. It's a breath of fresh air, to be honest with you, where you have people excited to go there, they're excited to go to the games. There's excitement around the franchise again, and like we've spoken about here for the last 10 minutes, it's not a shock. At every key position around this organization, you have strong leaders with, best in class mentality, to keep it simple. So, again, I think the biggest reason Sens fans should have optimism is that we're heading in the right direction, sure. But the reason we're heading in the right direction and why, and going to that direction, why we're going in that direction, is because we have strong leaders who, again, are best in class. And I said it in my last video, I'll say it here. Best in class is not just a slogan for some teams. I think some people, when they heard Ann Lauer say it, like in his introductory press conference, oh, that's very nice. It's the way of life for this organization, and you can tell just with the little things they do with the organization inside, but also with the community. So, yeah, I mean, again, I cannot agree with you more on what you were saying there. Kind of shifting back to on the ice here, going into next year, before we kind of talk about the off season and whatnot, what to expect coming up. What are your expectations with what we know right now going into next year for the Ottawa Senators? Are they a playoff team, do you think?
Oh, I think they are. Yeah, I think they start out as a team
Great.
that people perceive to be a playoff team simply because um, of how they play now. When this team, which was not that long ago, when this team was a top 10 offensive team, people said, "Well, how can you be a top 10 offensive team and you can't make the playoffs?" Well, because you can't defend. What I mean? Now they can defend, and nobody even bothers to look at the fact that, oh, this team was in the bottom half of the league offensively, and they still
30th
made the
for
playoffs.
5-on-5 scoring.
Yeah, exactly. But that tells you how important it is to be able to defend because it can cover up a lot of warts in the rest of your game. And so for me, what my expectation is that this is a playoff team simply because the number one thing to get you in the playoffs is ability to defend. And we now know that that's how Travis Green coaches, and that's how this team plays. So yeah, they're a playoff team. Other than that, I always reserve my expectations about what's possible for the team until we get closer to training camp, mostly because you don't know who's going to be on the team. Like we're at a point right now where we've talked about the fact that each roster around the NHL changes by about 20% every year. This is no different, and this team right now has within the organization, not just in the NHL but AHL as well. This team has 23 free agents. They've got 10 RFAs they have to look at. Some they'll make qualifying offers to, some they will not. That's a pretty normal thing. And they've got what, 12, 13 UFAs?
Yeah, and I got them written here. We'll talk about those in a sec. But
Yeah, so some will get re-signed, some won't. Some will want their UFAs. Some will want to move on to try and find what they perceive as more opportunity somewhere else. So that will change the dynamic of both the NHL team a little bit, and it'll change the dynamic of the AHL team a little bit. So hard to say, what the team's going to be next year before we know who's on the team next year. And because of that movement, that there's going to be something happening, July 1st when free agency opens up. Is Ottawa interested in any free agents out there? What positions are they looking at? What roles are they looking at? What kind of a player are they looking at to fill those roles? All those things are wide open right now. And that goes into at least my ability to have some kind of an idea about what I think the possibilities are for the team. So this is the time of year where I never think about, what this team is for next year, other than the fact because now philosophically this team is dependable defensively. That makes them, to me, in my mind, dependably playoff contenders.
agreed. And we spoke about this last year. When you have a goaltender like Linus Ullmark, and you have, as we said that would be a key last year, and we saw it this year, the defensive structure improve. I don't see how they miss the playoffs next year, purely because the defensive structure should hold. The goaltending, I don't see why it wouldn't hold, especially, and we'll talk about it later, with some reinforcements potentially coming in there to help out Allmark. But the offense has to round back into form. There's no way this team, with the additions of Cousins and Zetterlund for a full year, is second or third last in the NHL for 5-5 scoring. But on that note, in free agency, we have a handful of guys. Key guys include, of course, Claude Giroux, Travis Hamnick, Dennis Gilbert, Matthew Highmore, Adam Gaudette. I'll say this about Gaudette. I don't think he's going to come back. I think he's going to get a payday somewhere else, and a well-deserved one at that. That's just a personal thing, in my opinion. And then Nick Cousins as well. Obviously, I just kind of gave my opinion on Adam Gaudette. I love to bring him back. I just think he's going to be a little too expensive for us on that fourth line. But out of that group of guys that are free agents, obviously Giroux, I think you would say should be brought back. But including Giroux and everyone else, is there anyone else you would want to bring back, or would it just be Claude Giroux? What are you kind of thinking there?
Well, it's not a matter of what I want. It's kind of what I expect will happen.
Yeah.
Claude wants to be back and the team wants him back, which tells me they'll probably find a way to make that work. And I think obviously at his age, he's I'm sure expecting to take a pay cut, and it's just a matter of how much. But I think probably the biggest deciding factor on that may well be term.
Yeah.
Like I don't think anybody, whether it's Ottawa or anybody else, is going to offer a 3-year deal. Probably the team would like one just to be able to see where you are after a year because, at that age, but I think he might try to push it to try and get two. So, maybe that's where they end up. I'm not sure. But Claude still has a ton left in the tank and he is a super important player on this team. So you'd love to see that. But, other parts of it are, the other part of it is that we always talk about these things in terms of what the team is going to do.
Mhm.
These guys are UFAs, which means as unrestricted free agents, they get to choose. The team doesn't choose. The team can choose to make them an offer or not, but the player chooses. So, I'm not sure that a guy like Angus Crookshank is going to choose to resign here because I think he's probably a guy who thinks he deserved to be called up more this year. And he's at that stage of his career in hockey where if he's going to be an NHL player, he has to be on a team that is going to give him a shot at being a regular NHL player. And I'm not sure this is the franchise. So if you're saying, is Ottawa going to re-sign Angus Crookshank? Wouldn't surprise me if the answer is no, and it's because Angus Crookshank doesn't want to sign. He might think there's more opportunity for him somewhere else. So, it's the same. It's the same for a guy like Forsberg. Like I don't know what's going to happen there. I think it probably would be good for this organization to have him back for another year to give Maryline another year to just kind of, percolate in the AHL and come back and forth and play both games. Because I don't think anybody knows for sure whether Levy is ready to be an everyday NHL player and is it good for his development to be a backup and, how many games is he going to play? But, but again, Forsberg is a guy who's an unrestricted free agent. If he gets a 3-year contract offer from somebody else for the same money or more, he's got to look after his family. If I'm him, I'm taking that just because you're going to get 3 years. So when people say, are they going to keep Forsberg? It's an equally good question. Is Forsberg going to stay here?
Mhm.
I know he loves living here. I know his family does, but he's got to make as much money in that narrow life window that he has to play professional hockey to set his family up for life. So if he gets a 3-year offer at the same or better money somewhere else, he'd be nuts not to take it. Then as an organization, you ask yourself, do we go out and try to find a more veteran goalie who's okay with being a backup,
Yeah.
or do we really bank on Levy Marilyn and being ready, or Mads Sogard being ready to be an everyday NHL backup? And I can't get in their heads and figure out where they think they are with that. But that's the only thing ultimately that matters: where they think they are, not where me or you or anybody else thinks it is. It's in their mind what they think it is, because they're privy to so much more information. They're privy to so many more conversations. They're privy to so many other things and their experience. Coaches, managers, scouts, they all have specific skills that don't have anything to do with time. I've been doing this for, like I said, 34 years. I know that my knowledge base is nowhere close to being anywhere close to a manager's knowledge base or a coach's knowledge base or a scout's knowledge base. So simply doing it for a long time, doesn't mean you have the skill to be able to have that kind of knowledge. And so those are very skilled people that are making very tough decisions. And me trying to pretend I know what they're thinking is kind of a farce. Like I do, he shoots, he scores. I'm a play-by-play guy. Like other than ants and beetles, like there's not many things I'm smarter than. So, like me pretending I know what they're going to do is kind of a farce. But, that's part of what they have to do.
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of what we have to do too, right? We kind of,
Yeah.
I think the best way to say it is we have to guess. We have to kind of
Yeah.
guess what they're going to do. And I think on that note, I honestly don't think Forsberg comes back purely because, like you said, there's going to be a better opportunity somewhere else. And I think Ottawa, I think they bring in a guy maybe on a one way, but definitely on a two way with veteran experience that can bounce back and forth between the AHL and NHL as well. There can be kind of that committee. I think Levy has shown that he can purely because, I mean, yes, it was a short sample size, and you're absolutely right. Is it good for him to ride the bench for more than half the season in his development and key years? Again, people always forget goaltenders. The fact he's this good so early is insane because goalies they take much longer to develop, much, much, much longer. Especially, if you're coming over from Europe, right? Sometimes it takes a bit of time to acclimate as well. So, the turnaround for Levi Merlainen, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say on Forsberg, um, I think I would gamble on him not being back, and this may or may not mean anything. It may not mean anything, but it is something that doesn't happen very often. Goaltenders over the course of the season, unless there's a specific problem with their pads, but just in normal case scenario, they will go through 3 or 4 sets of pads a year. So at very near the very end of the season,
I know.
Forsberg got his last set of pads that came in, and the last set of pads came in were pure white, no coloring on them, which oftentimes tells you he doesn't know whose colors he'll be wearing next year because when he starts next season, those will be his starting pads. So that might be kind of an indicator that he's not exactly sure where he's going to be to start next season. Because if you feel pretty strongly that you're going to be back in Ottawa, you're going to have Ottawa coloring on your pads. Like it's not the Artur Zerbe era anymore where guys play with just bleach white pads. That doesn't really happen anymore. So again, I don't know if that does or doesn't mean anything,
No,
but
I
it,
think it
it, it
does.
was it was noticed at the end of the year when he came
Yeah.
out practicing, breaking in a new set of pads, and there was no coloring at all on the pads.
No, that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you later on because that, and you just answered it for me. Thank you. I didn't really understand why. And now that you said that, cannot agree more. That actually makes quite a lot of sense. It didn't really make
Or
sense.
or it means nothing.
It could mean nothing. Hey,
Or it means
take a
nothing. I
tinfoil
don't know.
hat off. Hey,
Yeah, I don't know.
who knows? Who knows? But I think you're onto something. I think there's some truth to that. And again, um, I'm surprised there's not more noise. Again, it's the playoffs. Who's focusing on the backup goaltenders' pads? Fair enough. But I am
Exactly.
surprised no one really was speaking about that because I do agree. And I noticed it right away when the first practice pictures came out and he was wearing different pads. I was like, oh. I mean, I kind of like them to be honest, but whoa, it's a little different because his old set a lot of color. So that's why I think you're right. This is a guy that likes to be flashy, right? All his pads have been flashy. His helmets are cool looking. So I think there's some truth to that. But hey, time will
We'll
tell.
see.
Time
Yeah,
will
we'll
tell.
see.
Now, in terms of the extensions, we kind of already spoke about Claude Giroux, but the younger guys, you got Zetterlund as an RFA, you got Levi Merlainen and Clevin as well. Kind of quickly, how do you view those going down? Like Levy, I'll just say quickly, I see Levy signing a 1, 2 year deal. Because again, he has shown that he can do well, but he hasn't proven that he can do it long term. Clevin, I think they try to lock down for 2, 3 years. I don't know if he'll want to do more than 2, 3 years because he's going to get a big payday after that, in my opinion. And then Zetterlund's really interesting as well. I really don't know what happens with that. I'm going to throw it to you. What do you think?
I look at all those guys and I think they'll all be back because as RFAs, to be honest with you, they really don't have much choice.
They're restricted.
It's if you're a restricted free agent, you take the qualifying offer or whatever offer they make, and if you choose that you don't like it, you can hold out if you want, or you can try and negotiate it higher. But at the end of the day, it's called restricted free agent for a reason, and the restrictions are pretty much all on the player, not on the team. So it's very much a team advantage when they have the player still in his RFA years and hasn't got to his unrestricted years yet. So, I think with a guy like Clevin, he's going to get more than I think that I might be wrong about this, but I think the qualifying offer can't be less than 10% higher than his last contract. And so on his entry level, they're all making under $1 million a year. I think a guy like Cleven's probably going to get offered more than that, but you can't see any one of those deals really breaking the bank, because all those players are still in the ascending part of their career. You don't yet know exactly what they are. And this league is notorious for paying based on promise, not performance. It used to be in this league when free agency didn't start till you were 32. You didn't get the contract that they give to 50 goal scorers until you'd done it 3 times. Now they give you the kind of money 50 goal scorers get when you
True.
score 37 goals because they think you can score 50,
True.
which a lot of those contracts have blown up in teams'
Yes.
faces, but that is the environment in the league now. This league pays based on what the perception is you'll do, not what you've actually performed. So I think that there's no one who doesn't think of Cleven as a regular, everyday NHL player. So you're going to get him up into the regular, every young, but everyday NHL player category. And if he's going to have a big bump as far as his contract, it'll probably be the one after this one.
Mhm.
And that's normal. It should be that way. You should have to prove yourself for more than a season to be able to bang up into that next level. And with other guys, I don't think they traded Zetterlund not to re-sign him. You know what I mean? I don't think he was traded to be a rental. So I think there's going to be something there. But there's other guys. There's other guys that they have to take care of coming down the pipe as well. And for us, we look at it each
By
year.
the way.
Who's
He's
that?
eligible for a contract extension. I didn't want to put him in that group, but Pinto could be extended this summer too, as one of those players you're kind of talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so, the team, Staios and Dave Poulin and those guys and Timmy Pattison and everybody in hockey operations, they're looking 1, 3, 5 years out, and they have to balance what the salary structure in the team is going to look like in 3 years, not by July. You know what I mean? So they have to have a different perspective and a different view of it than we do. And sometimes when they make a move, you go, well, like, why would they do that? Well, they're doing that because it's like a poker game or a pool game. They have to line up their shot in 3 years because this guy in 3 years is going to cost this in this, like, so their job is far harder in that regard than just us sitting there going, "Oh, sign that guy and don't sign that guy and sign that guy." Like, we can do it. It's easy for
Yeah.
us to do it. We had nothing. It's not our money, nothing at stake. Neither one of us are going to lose our job because we screwed something up. They do. So I think you have to look at what you have, what you need, and then go about finding out if that's already within your organization. If it's not, then you got to lean on your pro scouting staff, and you've got to start looking at trades, and you got to start looking at free agency, and that's the biggest part of this thing. And for me, when I look at this team, I look at areas, and you kind of mentioned it about Cleven earlier on about he wasn't great at the start of the season, but really on that left side D, organizationally, they did not have a lot of depth after him. So he got a far longer look and then worked himself into the job and then became super solid. But I look organizationally at this team, and you look at areas where I'm sure they would like to be deeper, like still on that left side defense. Because if you look, like, I keep my own, like I make my own depth chart that I'm always running every day, and it's just my one look thing that tells me, because I put guys on this page not based on where they play the game, but
Yeah.
what they're logged into, as far as the league goes, as far as position goes. Because if you get to the worst case scenario and you have to have an emergency call up, you have to call up by position.
Mhm.
So whatever a guy is listed as, that's what his position is. So if you look at the list, actual left wingers, not a center who plays left side, or a guy like David Perron or Fabian Zetterlund who are right shots but prefer to play the left side, actual left wingers. Right now in this organization, organizationally, you've got Brady Tkachuk, Jan Yannick, Cole Reinhardt, Angus Crookshank, and Philip Daou. So in
Yikes.
actual left wingers. Now, as we've seen, and as we know with every
Road
team in the
games.
league, you're moving guys who are natural centers will play that. Like Nick Cousins is a natural registered center, but I can't remember the last year he played center. So we all understand those things. But if you're looking at this team's depth chart, they are not deep in natural singular left wingers, and they are not deep as far as experienced left side defensemen. They have some guys coming up that show a lot of potential. Sabrango's coming up.
Mhm.
Jorian Donovan's coming up. Thomas Hamara is, like, there's guys that are there. But talking about guys today that you would say, if you needed them to be an everyday NHL player, are they ready for that? After you get by Dennis Gilbert,
Yeah.
where does the list go? So I think organizationally, as they try to do every year, you try to increase your depth in certain areas. And I would not be surprised if you see some guys with more experience, maybe not at the NHL level or back and forth, but just more experience as professional left wingers and left side D, even though people are always clamoring for that. Another right shot defenseman, another right. Well, you know what? They got Yakimchuk coming.
Yep.
They've got guys on the right side, and almost every left side D can play right side because growing up, almost all of them had to.
Yeah.
Because,
It's always a need.
well, yeah, left side D are far more regular than right side D.
Yep.
So, and some of them are better at it than others. So, I look in the offseason about not just the NHL team, but the entire franchise and depth at
Yeah.
position. And like I said, if
He's
people see this team in the summertime go, like, why are they signing another like AHL left winger?
you
Because
need
they
it.
need more
You need it.
experience depth on that left side for the organization, not just for the NHL team. So stuff like that is the stuff that I try to look at over the course of the offseason to see where they're going, and you know what their mentality is by what they do. Like, they don't have to hold a press conference to say it. Actions speak louder than words in the offseason. You know what they think their needs are based on the type of players they sign and the type of players they go after. That's what they think their need is.
Well, you mentioned basically half of the NHL contracts, which includes players on two ways in Belleville, are up for free agency basically this year. There's going to be a lot of turnover, and a lot of
Yep.
people undervalue the importance of a strong AHL team, not only just for, the fans there in Belleville, but for the development of some guys there in Belleville as well. You need to have a strong team. If you have a horrible team, how are your guys going to develop down there properly, right? They need to have some success. Doesn't matter what level it is. So, but on top of all that, you also need guys that can help fill in, whether it's in Belleville or here in Ottawa. And kind of on that note, we're talking about needs. What do you think are the Ottawa Senators, not organizational, just for the Ottawa Senators in the immediate future, their biggest needs to address this offseason?
I think probably if I was looking at it, I would say probably the number one thing would be um, left winger on the second line would be the number one thing. And I know everybody's all hot and bothered by another top six rights. You've got guys who can play that side, but I look at this, and a scout from another organization said this to me before the playoffs started. We bumped bumped into each other, and we were talking about it, and he made the face and asked me the question, and I had never thought of this before. But he looked at me and he said, "So Ottawa wants to be a tempo team." And I said, "Well, yeah, every team wants to be a tempo team. You want to play at speed."
That's
And he said, "So you think next year, if you want to be a tempo team, you think next year you can be a tempo team if you have both Perron and Giroux in your top six? Like, you can have one older guy that is not going to be super fast because he brings other things to the table. But he said, if you want to be a tempo team, you think you can have two of them in your top six?"
fair
And I
point.
started thinking, fair point. So both of them, especially obviously if Giroux is back, but both of them have important roles. But then I started thinking that does make a lot of sense to me. So you might move Perron further down in your lineup and spot him up in different areas on the second power play and whatever. But in general, rolling 5-on-5, if you want to be a younger tempo-based team, what's missing? Well, Brady is going to be the number one left winger on this team. So who's second line left wing? You would like to think that it could be Zetterlund,
Mhm.
but what if you aren't absolutely sure he can be that guy? Then you have to find one, because we've already talked about that left side and what they have right now. You don't have one right now where you can say that's our guy who's good enough to be an offensive player right out of the box coming up from the AHL to play second line minutes on this team. And second line minutes usually means you're on one of the two power play units. So that's generally not a player who's coming out of the AHL. That's generally a player who's proven somewhere else.
Yes.
He can do that. Maybe it's a free agent you sign who this year currently played for, I don't know, Chicago, who already knows Brady personally. Maybe it's
Yeah.
somebody like that. If you dip your toe into the free agent market, I heard a bunch of people say to me, like, you think they'd be interested in Nikolai Ehlers? Well, yeah, but who
Yeah, I
wouldn't
think
be?
so.
For sure. But you don't know if there's a bidding war for a guy like Nikolai Ehlers, if you can get into that, if he's interested in coming to Ottawa, if you don't know those things. But going into the trade deadline, there's an awful lot of talk about that anonymous, I don't know what his name might be, left winger in Chicago. So that's the kind of thing that I look at, and you try to think about what they want to achieve, and do they have Do they have it within their own realm to be able to
Mhm.
fulfill their own need? And I think right now, like I said, because we've gone down the list of left wingers they have in the organization, probably not. So
Well,
then
I
you
would
got to go find it.
Well, I would agree with you that they definitely need to bring in a top six guy. And one of my questions, and you mentioned Ehlers, so I won't ask it. I'll just mention it now. Besser's another guy that we were kind of in on in rumors in the deadline. Of course, there's that connection with Travis Green, also the positional need, a scorer. It makes sense, but he's going to make probably, and it's free agency. We spoke with this literally 10 minutes ago. I don't want to overpay for a guy when we have potentially other ways to get a guy like that. They're talking $8 to $9 million. There's no way you're signing a guy who's going to be a 20, 30 goal scorer, 50, 60 points probably on this team, and pay him more than your captain. It's just not going to happen. I can't see that. Or Tim Stützle. Maybe I'm wrong. Clip this if I'm wrong in the future. We'll see. I just don't see it. But I do want to ask you this because we kind of spoke about free agency, and I want to talk about that the entire time. But the trade side of thing makes it interesting because we have some pieces we could afford to move. And I think the most coveted one that not enough people are talking about because again, we've mentioned many times, the depth is not exactly there for the Ottawa Senators organizationally. But would you trade this year's first round pick for an immediate impact top six player?
Anything's possible. I would say probably yes. Um, Mostly because Ottawa's not going to have a pick in the top half of the draft,
Yes,
and I don't pretend to know. Like I'm not out scouting players, draft eligible players around the world. I can't tell you who the top left winger is coming up in Slovenia. Like I have no idea. I look at those draft previews from guys that I know and respect, and I trust their judgment. And the scouts that I talk to tell me, but I don't know who they are, so I'm not sure what's available in the bottom half of the first round of the draft. But what I know is by the time whoever that player is, by the time that player is ready to be in the NHL, which on average would be best case scenario 3 years. I think this team's goals are more immediate than that.
agreed.
So if you can get something and make that a part of what you give up to get something that gives you immediate help, then you do that. And I know that exacerbates the problem that in the minors right now for Ottawa, they don't have a lot of high-end offensive skill players on the way up. They don't.
They don't.
So, that doesn't help solve that problem. But again, this is very much, what have you done for me lately league now. It's
Mhm.
very much what's the next thing coming up? And you look at some teams in this league, and I think a lot of managers now are really questioning whether you can build through the draft and have the kind of success you think you should. Because there's a couple of teams that have basically built through free agency and trades and almost abandoned drafting the future of their team. And you have other examples of teams that have drafted successfully and a lot of very good players, and they've gone nowhere. Um, you know, Buffalo might have, I'd have to count, but Buffalo may have the highest ratio of players on their NHL team that are drafted by the team, like where these are all
Yeah.
their own draft picks over the years. And they're what now, 13 years of missing the playoffs?
That's
New Jersey couldn't get over the hump again this year. And, it depends on how they want to line up. Then it's different for different games, but a couple of games that Ottawa played against them with the guys that they ran down the middle, every one of their centers in a couple of games against Ottawa was a first round draft pick
mhm.
of the team.
Yeah.
So and they can't get over the hump. So this idea that you can draft yourself a championship team, maybe you still can, but that takes a long time. But there is just as much of a case to be made that you can, and some teams have successfully traded and used free agency to get to that point. So
Mhm.
getting back to your original point, I think if there's a deal they want to make, I'm not sure that people stand up in the room and go, guys, 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 we cannot trade,
Yeah.
a first round draft pick. I don't, it's what I'm saying is, I don't think that is at all off the table.
Mhm.
I would be surprised if that is at all off the table.
I think the only reluctance would be because, and I think I still have hope that they reverse the ridiculous decision to get rid of that first for next year, which is what it's going to be now if they keep this year's
That's
pick.
a joke.
It is a joke. It's another
It
joke.
is a
And
joke.
can we just talk about that for a sec? I don't want to get you in trouble. I'll do most of the talking. I just want to
How
say,
do I get in trouble? I
oh,
don't
then
work for the team.
let's just let it go. Let's let it rip
The
because
league can't find me for having an opinion. If I was a team employee, they could, but like I work for the radio station. I don't work for the team. I can say whatever I want. And it's a joke. I'll
it
tell you
is a
right.
joke. Go
It,
ahead.
it
Let it rip.
In only I think I only need to bring up one thing. After everything that went on in Chicago, where there's
Yeah, literally.
sexual
Joke.
abuse. A couple of guys lost their job, but Chicago didn't lose a draft pick.
Lost a couple $1 million. That's all. A joke.
And Ottawa loses a first round pick over this? You're comparing these two things with each other? Like, how does one compare with the other? And the league thought those fines for each situation are totally fine. I don't know many people who would think those two situations are close to comparable as far as your morality about the kind of penalty that should be imposed. But when Chicago had to pay a fine, and like you said, a couple of $1 million, and a couple of guys lost their jobs and got sent, banished, both of whom are now back. The head coach and the general manager are back in the league now.
Yep.
And Ottawa gets dinged a first round draft pick. Like the inequity in that to me, in my personal opinion, is a joke. Is a joke.
I cannot agree more. And I keep on saying this with the NHL, and I think it all stems back to the fact that Ann Lauer called out the National Hockey League back with the Pinto stuff. Why did I inherit this mess? He asked. And ever since then, the NHL has really been hard on the Ottawa Senators. It just looking at the playoffs, setting aside what you just said, which is so true, that the Ottawa Senators got a harsher penalty than a team covering up literal sexual assault, okay, which is a joke. It's an utter joke. And I can't imagine, how a person like the player involved there in Chicago, Kyle Beach, would feel just thinking about that to begin with. I don't know. I can't imagine how he feels just in general. I mean, it's just horrible. And it's not shocking, to be honest. The NHL didn't handle that well. I mean, we've
How
seen
about
them
the how about the
handle a lot of
but
things well.
Brandon,
Yeah.
how about the same people knowing what had gone on, then endorsing this guy to get another job with
Yeah.
younger players?
Yeah.
Like
It's
it's like what? It's
yeah.
just crazy. It's just crazy.
And speaking of crazy, I mean, in the playoffs, the Nick, whatever, you want to find Nick Cousins, whatever, or whatever. I don't think anyone cares. But finding the National Hockey League, finding the Ottawa Senators, what? Like, I have to ask you, do you think the league has an issue with the organization? Honestly, like, speak candidly. I'm being honest. Like, I think they do.
I don't know. I really don't know. All I know is that um, very often happens all the time, all around the league. Players who know each other, who are friends, used to play together. During the warm up, when they skate by each other at center ice, they'll tap each other's shin pads. Or in this case, flip a couple of pucks 2 miles an hour to your buddy who you used to play with.
Yeah.
The two pucks that Nick Cousins flipped were so light, going so slowly that Stolars didn't even know he'd done it.
Hmm. If
But
you've
then,
played sports, this is normal. I'm just saying. If
yeah,
you played sports,
yeah,
this is normal. I mean, come
So
on,
when two goalies used to be
shenanigans.
partners together are at center ice
Yeah.
stretching and they're talking to each other and they tap each other's pads, is are they both getting fined after that? Like it is ridiculous.
Hmm.
You can tell which players or which situations are truly inflammatory. When two tough guys skate by each other and start talking, then their next round around the other guys a foot over the line,
Hmm.
that's inflammatory.
Different.
You want to deal with that? Go ahead. But when two guys who know each other tap each other's pads on the way by, or flip a puck at each other and laugh and get back in line to
Mhm.
do drills, that's been going on in this league for 100 years. Stop making yourself look foolish, penalizing that as if it's a crime. Like, just stop.
Amen.
And what I thought was embarrassing, I don't know this for a fact, but considering that the video of it is like Zapruder-like video because no one was filming it, I'm suspecting the video that they had was so poor that they had to find it
Yeah.
was because, and I don't know this for a fact, but I believe that the Maple Leaf management is the one that complained to the league about it. This wasn't the league
Right.
going, "Hey, did you spot that?" Like I believe it was brought to their attention. And my only thing was, are you really that petty that that's something you're going to take to the league? Your goalie didn't even know that the puck had touched him. And it's his friend. They talk each week, for heaven's sakes. They were teammates.
So just to
This was not.
clarify, are you guessing or are you saying you've heard that the organization, the Leafs, reached out to the NHL about this?
I have heard that, but I don't know that to be true.
Okay.
I have heard that, but I don't know that to be true. And it was pointed out to me that if somebody from the league had seen this and it said, "Hey, we got to crack down on that. That's that pregame stuff. We got to crack down on that." Where did they see it? Because I'm not sure that it was covered by, the TV networks don't cover warm up very much. And if you've seen the video of it, and they only have a video of one puck, it
Yeah.
looks like somebody literally did it on a flip phone. You know what I mean? Like the video is
So
as
grainy.
bad as you can
Yeah.
get, and it still be a video. You know what I mean? So I don't ultimately, I can't say that I know this for a fact, but that's what I had been told.
Mhm.
And I just,
Crazy.
I had a buddy call me from another city, and he called me, and we were talking about it, and he said, "Well, heard the Leafs complained." I said, "Really? They complained? It wasn't the league?" And he's the one who told me. He said, "Well, look at the video." And to be honest with you, I didn't know there was video at the time. I hadn't seen it, and I didn't know. So then I looked, and I thought to myself, "That's the best video of this?" Like, you unless you knew that what was happening, the video is so bad you couldn't tell that's what was happening.
Like, no
So
one
anyway,
caught that on camera. Is
yeah,
what you're like. I completely agree,
yeah.
obviously.
So anyway, my point is that if there's any kind of the most subtle light contact or anything during a warm up, and that's fine worthy, that means the NHL missed about 16,000 fines this year because former teammates and buddies tap each other on the pads during the warm up and skate by each other or flip pucks at each other in a fun way all the time. All the time. Choosing to penalize that one at that time, I think makes the league look petty. I think it's beneath the league to do something like that, especially since, the very next game, the Montreal game, the very
Montreal.
next game, you got guys threatening each other at center ice, and now you're obliged, you have to deal with that. But if you saw during the regular season, with Jack in Montreal, that's his job. He's doing that every game. Like every warm up, he's threatening somebody. That's his job,
And
and
on
the
that
league
note,
allows that. Like I don't get it.
in the Blues Jet series, we saw the literal exact same thing play out the day before Cousins did the exact same thing. It's almost like you said, maybe it's been happening for 100 years, which goes back to my main point. Why does the National Hockey League continually use the Ottawa Senators as use them as a thing to set an example with? And again, we'll just leave it at that because I cannot confirm anything, but it's certainly interesting that all this has suddenly happened after Anlauer bought the team and called out the league. It's hell of a coincidence, and I guess we'll just leave it at that. Some quick hits here to get back on more of a fun note. We kind of spoke about him before. We'll talk about him quickly here. Kari Yakimchuk, do you think he makes the team? I know we don't know, big summer ahead, but what do you think with the way the roster's currently configured?
Maybe, a solid maybe, because I think last year in his training camp and preseason, he was good enough to start the season here last year. So I don't think he regressed this year, even though, he didn't make the Canadian World Junior team, and that's a different debate for a different day. But I think there's parts of his game for him to be a regular NHL player that, like a lot of young players and a lot of first round draft picks like him, need to learn. He's a very good offensive defenseman, and he can generate points. And he proved last year that, he can play at this level. But I think to play every day at this level, there's still some things he has to learn. So I think he, like almost any player, could probably really benefit from at least a year, maybe more in the AHL. I don't know any player that has not benefited in some way from playing in the AHL, and I don't know where we got to as a hockey culture where there is some kind of an explanation needed from people if a first round draft pick has to play in the AHL, like as if there's been some kind of a failure
Shabbat
or
did that.
someone
I
or
mean,
someone misscouted or something like.
mhm.
But you know how people talk. Well, like
Yeah.
you guys a first round draft pick. Like why are they sending him to the AHL? This assumption that every guy who's picked in the top 10 in the league goes straight to the NHL. It's never been that way. It will never be that way. And
Only
some guys
recently
are
it's kind of
ready.
gone in that way, for the record. It's
Yeah,
only been recent.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, Eric Carlson played in the minors. I mean, like I said, it never hurts a young player to get that part of his game up to the level where it's easier to be able to get to the NHL and stay there because you want to have as little bouncing back and forth as you possibly can, where you get to a level where your play is consistent enough that when you get to the NHL, you stay in the NHL. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. Maybe he is, if ready to play in the NHL, and as a right shot defenseman, the unicorns, people are always looking for them. But like I said, I wouldn't think anything is untoward if he starts his pro career in Belleville and primarily plays in Belleville next year. I don't see how that hurts him. But training camp will tell, as every coach and every manager will tell you, players decide who makes the team. Their performance is what decides who makes the team and who doesn't. And especially now, Steve Staios has said a million times, this franchise now is merit based,
Mhm.
not contract based. Guy's not playing here simply because he's on a one way. They've sent guys on one ways down to the minors. Zach McEwen spent most of his time in Belleville this year as opposed to the NHL, and he's on a one-way contract. You just don't automatically, get your job in the NHL because you were fortunate to get a one-way contract. If somebody else made a mistake giving that to you, doesn't mean we live by it. We'll suck up the money and pay it in the minors, but if you don't make the team, you don't make the team. So if he's on the team next year, if he makes the team out of training camp, it will be because he earned it, not because he was a first round pick, so we got to start him. Like that. That won't be the case with this team. He will be an Ottawa Senator, and not a Belleville Senator. He'll be an Ottawa Senator when he's ready to be an Ottawa Senator.
I think, and again, I'm not a scout, but his skating and it's basically his skating, and that's a big concern for a defender. His skating needs some development from what I've read from people that know much more about these kind of things than me. So I don't think time in Belleville would hurt. In fact, I hope he starts in Belleville. I'd rather him start in Belleville, play his game instead of trying to play another style of game here on the third pairing where he would likely be. Let him dominate in the AHL. Let him play power play one. Let him be on the first pairing. Let him grow into his game. What is the rush? Why do you need him on Ottawa right away? Our defensive pairings right now, and again, we'll see if there's movement in the offseason, but right now, it got us to the playoffs. It got us some offense. You got Sanderson, you got Shabbat, you got Clevin, three guys on the left, and then on the right, Zub, who we all love. Zub. Can you give us a Zub, by the way, Dean?
Uh,
Zub. No, okay.
who?
Fair enough. There we go. Zub, Jensen, and then maybe you have Yakimchuk kind of getting in there, but maybe another guy in free agency. We'll never know until that time comes. So again, there's no rush. Cannot agree with you more on that.
But you know
Now,
what? This is what we talked about earlier, though, Brandon, about next year, 3 years, 5 years. When you look at that right side right now, you said he's going to be a third pair guy. Well, maybe not. Like if you're looking at right now and you're saying Clevin and Matt Palo, that's a proven third pair. That's a proven third pair that was pretty good in the playoffs. But in Jensen, you look at his age; he's got one more year left at 4 million, and he's having problems. And we don't know because he won't say, but we all believe it's his knee, may need surgery. We don't know. And Zub, after this coming season, he'll have one more year left. So when Yakimchuk does get to the NHL, it's far more likely that he would be replacing one of those players than Matt and Palo. So, that automatic assumption that, well, you got those two guys. Well, you got those two guys next year. But if you're the team, if you're the organization, you're looking next year, 3 years, 5 years. And so, if you have Yakimchuk in Belleville next year, and he is able after just 1 year in the AHL to make the ascension to the NHL, it's probably more likely it would be to be a second pair defenseman, not a third pair defenseman. You know what I mean? So again, you have to look at your depth chart the way they look at it, which is, yeah, today, but also we got to think about 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And like I said, that just automatic assumption, well, Yakimchuk would come in and play third pair with Clevin. Well, maybe not, maybe not.
yeah, for sure. I think there's some fairness to that. I was just saying immediately in the short term, a guy like Yakimchuk with defensive issue and his main um, uh, name to the game, I guess, that he has would be his offensive abilities. Putting him next to a guy like Shabbat, I don't want a guy next to Shabbat that is a defensive liability who's young, who needs some growth. Because we saw Shabbat go back to good old Tom Shabbat this year when he could play his game. He had a guy like Nick Jensen next to him that allowed him to do that. Now, like you just said, is Jensen going to be ready for next year? That's a question in its own right. I mean, like, again, he might need surgery. So, yeah, maybe Yakupchuk is that guy that can step in. Cannot agree more. And then Sanderson and Zub, I think they did well. But, I think you're not going to put Yakupchuk on the first pairing. So I think Yakupchuk definitely projects as a second pairing guy, top four guy, no doubt about that. I just think next year, I don't know. I think it would stunt his growth, and I think it's throwing him to the fire. We got $18 million of cap space. Sure, we have to sign some guys, RFA, UFAs, whatever. But we got some money here. I think we can make it work. But like you said, hey, you never know. At the end of the day, training camp, it's up to the players to see where they end up, right? So we'll just have to wait and see on that. Kind of throwing it back to you, Dean. Doesn't
Yep.
have to be the Senators, but just in general, even just your year. What was the funniest moment of the season, in your opinion? Whether it's on the ice or just a personal experience of yours.
Oh, wow. The funniest.
I'm throwing a little bit of a curveball. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Should have warned you.
I don't, yeah, that's a really good question because, and I feel very fortunate in this, is that, in my job, what I do with Gord, we have fun every day. Like, you've heard our broadcast. Like,
Yeah,
we don't
that was based on that.
apologize for being ourselves, and we don't apologize that we have fun. So picking the fun or the funniest one is very hard to do. Just the everyday fun of doing it and the stuff we say on the air to each other, and some of it is every now and then can be a little bit risque, but that
We
just
love it.
comes out too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, man, that's a question I was not anticipating, and I can't remember a time at the rink, a day where there wasn't something that made me laugh. And trying to pick out the thing that was the funniest is actually, thankfully, hard to do. I think I probably would feel bad about myself and bad about my job if if it was easy to answer this question, because that would mean that there aren't very many circumstances that are really funny. But we laugh every day. There's something funny and something fun to talk about every day. Because to me, going to the rink for a living should be fun. It's supposed to be fun, and it is. And every day I know, and I know I can speak for Gord about this because we've had this discussion many times. There is nobody more grateful to have these jobs than Gord and I. We realize how many people would love to be in our shoes and how lucky we were to get these jobs and how lucky we've been to keep them. So, we are each day filled with an awful lot of um, we're both very grateful to be where we are and to have these jobs, and we have a lot of fun doing it, and we don't apologize for the amount of fun we have.
Amen. Amen. And that's the way it should be. If you're not having fun at work and you're not loving what you're doing something wrong. So, very, very happy to hear that. And again, yeah, I think I will say you guys have a lot of skill. You guys have been doing it for 30 years. I like the humbleness. Sure, there's a bit of luck in everything in life, I suppose, but you've earned it. You and Gord, of course, have both earned it. So I'm glad to hear that there's so many positive things. And again, it goes back to just again, like I was saying before, the atmosphere in the rink. It is really different, and you really do feel it. You truly do. Just even the security, like just everyone you speak to, whether it's security, just regular people in the rink, or people in management or whatever, you can just feel there's a difference, and it's a beautiful thing to be honest with you. It really is because again, this is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be a soap opera. You know what I mean? So great to hear that. A couple last questions. I know, and it's always funny whenever I have you on the show. It turns into like a 2 hour episode. I just love talking to you, Dean. But I noticed Shane Pinto at the World Championships had a neck guard, and obviously we started to see that the last little bit here after a couple of tragic incidents. Do you think we see the Sens start to kind of get into that next year, or is this maybe just Shea Pinto doing it?
I think it's just Shane because in the NHL there's no requirement that players
Mhm.
have to, so it is indeed a player's choice to wear one or not. And Claude wore one for a while. Um, I'm trying
Yeah,
to think.
that's true. He did. He wore it around
Claude wore one for
Christmas
a
time.
while, and
Yeah,
I
you're right. I forgot
I
about that.
think maybe Gaudette wore one for a while as well. But I kind of think if guys were going to wear them, they would already be wearing them.
Fair enough.
So maybe he's just trying it out over there, or maybe because this is not the NHL, Team USA requires it. Like I haven't bothered to look to see if any other of the Team USA players, if they're all wearing them, then it might be a team requirement. Because in
I
the
haven't
NHL,
noticed. That's why I
yeah,
asked. Yeah, I haven't noticed.
in the NHL they can't force guys to wear them. In the World Championships, though, your country, if they have rules, you have to live by them. So maybe that's it. I don't really know, but I wouldn't anticipate there's going to be a huge jump, mostly because if there was going to be one, I think it already would have happened in usage.
Fair enough. Now we'll leave off with a fun one because there's been a lot of rumors and speculation and drama, if you want to call it that, about the Senators' third jersey, which is set to be revealed for next year. A lot of us are expecting a red jersey. What do you want? What do you expect for Ottawa's new third jersey?
I have no idea. I don't know what's expected. To be honest with you, I can't, even though I look at them every day, I can't tell you which is first jersey, third jersey, 2D, 9D. I really don't. The jersey thing does not register with me. The only thing I care about, whether it's an Ottawa jersey or any team's jersey, is how easy is it to read from 250 feet away?
That's fair.
Like, how easy is it to see the numbers from 250 feet away? the color scheme, the graphics, the don't care in any way, shape, or form. So to me, that's a fan thing,
Mhm.
and it should be something that's driven by what the fans want, what the fans like. They're the ones buying them. They're the ones who have to appreciate them. But for me, I have no idea. I don't go around the internet searching for leaked versions to find out what it might be. I
Save
don't
that for
know.
us.
Yeah, I don't have any contacts where I could find out because I don't even know who's in charge of that because it just is not something that I care or think about. But I have a lot of people. Graham Creech, mostly my buddy who's the host of most of our pregame shows. Creature is very much a logo and hat and jersey guy, and he is still absolutely flummoxed that I don't care at all. Like he just can't understand how I don't care in any way. It just, how could I not? And I keep trying to tell him, Graham, it doesn't matter to me in any way. And he puts, like the segment that we do in the pregame show when he's doing Creech for the top, the five
Mhm.
questions. He every year he puts in questions about logos and about this, and every year he expects me to have an answer. And my answer is always, Creature, you know my answer. Don't care in any way, shape, or form as long as the numbers are legible, and that the outlining on them isn't the same color as the rest of the jersey, because then from 250 feet away, I can't tell what the number is. So
Yeah.
for me, that's the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter. And it drives him nuts that I don't care. It drives him insane. Okay, he'll say to
Well,
me, so like, do you like the 2D version? I said, I don't even know what the 2D, like, I don't know what that
let's
is.
keep it simple. We have black, we have white. Would you like to see a red one or a gold one or another black one? We'll keep it simple for you. You got to pick one of the three, though. Got to pick one
I,
of the three.
I don't care because if you wanted me to care, you'd have to tell me how the numbers contrast with the
Yeah,
main color of the jersey, because that's the only thing that matters to me. The base color to me is irrelevant. How do the numbers contrast with it?
yeah,
Because that's the ability for me to see them. Like the Flyers jerseys are the easiest ones in the league to see because you got bright orange with black,
black. Yeah.
like beautiful. Some are not nearly that easy. So I don't. I'll tell you the same thing I tell Creature. I don't care in any way. The only thing I care about is that the fans like the choices that they make. For me, the only thing that matters is, can I see the numbers from 250 feet away?
Well, to everyone watching, let us know down below who, or it's not who, but what jersey you would like to see the Ottawa Senators bring back. Would it be red? Would it be gold? Would it be black? Whatever color, put it down below in the comment section. Dean and I will be checking throughout the summer and
Oh
keep you
yeah, no, I won't. No, I won't.
updated.
Hey, you know what? I see your Phillips,
Yep,
Alfredson, and Neil pennants in the back. I think I've told you this before that Gord and I and Nick St. Pierre, we've emceed all three of those ceremonies.
he did
And
mention
the
this. Yeah.
yeah, and the company that made the banners that hang in the building also gave each one of us a smaller framed version, exact replica of those three. And I have them hanging in different spots, but I saw your Alfie jersey there and here
Yep.
in my office.
Well, there we go.
Um,
Oh yeah, look at that.
there's the framed version right
Yeah.
there.
Yep. That is the real deal right there.
And I'm very fortunate to have in another room downstairs in the rec room, I have the Philly one,
Mhm.
and actually friends of ours who have a suite at the Canadian Tire Center are huge Chris Neil fans. And
Mhm.
so our framed version of Chris Neil's one is on loan to them in their suite.
Well, that's nice of you.
So if you walk in, you go, well, how come in my suite I can't get? Yeah, well, you can't get those. They're not available. They're only so there's one suite there that has a Chris Neil replica pennant, a real one, and there's only one, and it's actually ours.
Shout out to you, Dean. I mean, again, honestly, thanks for showing us that because I find little things like that very cool as well. And not no one knows that that probably happened, and you got those as gifts, right? And
Yeah,
I think that's very very nice. And hopefully one day I'll be able to get those on the wall too. But I think these do for the time being. I think also
perfect.
a little bit of a sneak peek for everyone for next year for our coverage. I found a Frank Finnegan banner, so this is going to be brought to the back
Wow,
there. I know I couldn't believe it. I was on Marketplace and I found I'm like, whoa, this is something I gotta buy immediately.
nice.
Immediately. But besides that, Dean, I hope you have a great rest of your summer. Always a pleasure having you on. 90 plus minutes of Sens talk. I love it. I'm sure everyone watching this and listening to it loved it as well. Always a pleasure. We'll have to have you on again soon, obviously. But with that, let everyone know, I should say, where they can follow you, listen to you, and everything in between.
Um, you can follow me, I guess, on Twitter. I don't tweet. You probably see I don't tweet all that much anymore. And to be honest with you, I don't really very often get in conversations with people anymore because the idiot to competent conversation quotient now, that the gap is far larger. And so I just don't engage with a lot of people anymore because when you open the door, you might have one good conversation with somebody that's reasonable and but then it invites 10 more idiots into the conversation. Life is too short for that. But I'm on Twitter at what is my Twitter handle?
I can tell you right now. Let me Detective
At P
Plant will get on it. It's at PXP Ottawa.
That's right. That's my
There you
hand.
go.
And
Go
so
follow.
I'm on that. I'm on Instagram, but I next to never post there. And yeah, and that's it. Every now and then I'm on the radio. They call me, we do an interview, but there's nothing regular. So here and there, probably see at the grocery store if you're out there, if you're a fan, probably bump into the grocery store, the garden center. If I'm carrying five things of dirt, it's because she's told me to carry 5 things of dirt to the car. So I'll be that guy.
That's Keep an eye out for Dean, guys. I'll be doing the same exact thing. But Dean, we'll talk for sure during the summer. But we'll have to have you on again soon. Definitely closer to the to training camp and whatnot for sure to get your thoughts. But as usual, Dean, I hope you have a great summer. You and the dogs and your wife and everyone in between just have a great summer. Enjoy it. And we'll talk soon for sure. Take some time off of hockey. It's been a lot of hockey. Take some time for yourself and your family.
Well, no such thing as too much hockey, number one. But number two, I appreciate the sentiments. And anytime you need me, just give me a call.
Absolutely, Dean. Always a pleasure. We'll talk soon for sure.
Talk soon.